Hello. Today we're going to learn all about potential and kinetic energy. But first, what is energy? Energy is the ability to do work. Potential energy is the energy stored by a body at rest. This means it is the energy stored by a body that isn't moving, or a stationary body. You and I both have potential energy because we are not moving. Potential energy is also the energy an object has because of its position. What this means is, objects have different potential energy depending on where they are. This book has a higher potential energy when it is on the table than when it is on the floor. But don't worry, we'll learn more about that later. Let me show you some more examples of objects with potential energy. Come with me. Right here on this street are various examples of potential energy. Let me show you some of them. This signpost hanging at rest at a position above the ground is an example of potential energy. That bird above, resting on the street light, is an example of potential energy. This bowl of fruits at rest on the table here is also an example of potential energy. There are many more examples of potential energy around you. We shall come back here later and you shall show them to me yourself. Now let's talk about kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is the energy possessed by a moving body. When a ball is at rest on the ground, it has no kinetic energy, but when we apply a force to it, for example, I kick it and it starts moving, it therefore now has kinetic energy. So, any object that is moving has kinetic energy. The faster or heavier an object is, the more kinetic energy it has. Now, let us look at some examples. Previously, I showed you examples of potential energy on this street. Now let's look at examples of kinetic energy. This bus moving along the road is an example of kinetic energy. That boy crossing the road has kinetic energy. Look at this flag being blown left and right by the wind. It is an example of kinetic energy. So you have learnt definition of both potential energy and kinetic energy, and I have shown you some examples. Now, it's your turn to show me some examples. I will show you different objects and you will tell me whether they are examples of potential or kinetic energy. Let me remind you that potential energy is the energy possessed by a body at rest and kinetic energy is the energy possessed by a moving object. Look at the fruits hanging on this tree. What form does the fruits have? Is it potential energy or kinetic energy? Click on the correct option. Correct answer. The hanging fruits are at rest and therefore have potential energy. This Okada moving along the road is an example of what form of energy? That was correct. The Okada is moving and is therefore an example of kinetic energy. This overhead tank up there is an example of what form of energy? Is it potential energy or kinetic energy? Correct. Good job. The overhead tank is at rest and therefore an example of potential energy. Look at that boy, he is carrying a box on his head as he waits for the bus. The box on his head is an example of what form of energy? Is it potential energy or kinetic energy? You got it right. You did good on the quiz. The box is at rest on his head, so it is an example of potential energy. Let us go to the field. I have got some interesting things to show you. Do you know potential energy can be converted to kinetic energy? A body at rest at a height above the ground like this ball I am holding has potential energy, but when it is moved, pushed down, thrown or dropped and it starts moving, the potential energy becomes kinetic energy. When the ball reaches the ground it possesses neither potential nor kinetic energy. Even though it is at rest it doesn't have potential energy because it is on the ground and therefore the height above the ground is 0. More about this will be discussed in the next section. Also, as I sit at rest on top of this slide above the ground I possess potential energy, but as I slide down my potential energy is converted to kinetic energy. Now, look at the mountain over there. Can you see the big rock at rest on top of the mountain? It has potential energy. I want you to change it to kinetic energy by moving it. Now point and click on it to push it down.